I am now on the MTK hotline, and I'd like to welcome a very special guest to the show. His name is Dave Rogers. He lives in Columbus, Ohio. He's an avid Elvis fan. He's also one of the administrators of my favorite Elvis Facebook page, Elvis, a celebration of the man and his music, which has nearly 100,000 followers, which is very impressive. Dave, welcome to the Mop Tops and the King.
Hey, thanks, Steve. I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
So, Dave, you grew up in Ohio, is that right?
That is correct. Born and raised.
Okay, whereabouts in Ohio?
I'm from a little town called Xenia, Ohio, which is only known for being destroyed by a tornado in 1974.
Okay, because my wife wanted me to ask you if you were around during the tornado.
I was 8 years old, watched it from our front yard.
Wow, that must have been traumatic, I would imagine.
It was quite the experience. Thankfully, it did not hit our neighborhood, but my dad was a State Farm insurance agent, so we pretty much didn't see him for the next few months.
Wow, I'm glad you survived it.
Thanks.
So, how long have you been an Elvis fan?
I first became an Elvis fan in 1975 when I was 10 years old.
Did you ever see him in concert?
I did not. He came to Cincinnati, his second to the last concert, June 25th of 77. I had just turned 12. I really hadn't started going to concerts at that was such a young age back then that unfortunately I never got to see him.
I became an Elvis fan, I think, in 1977 when he died. I was 15. I knew of him, but, I didn't know enough about him, and then I was totally immersed in all things Elvis. How'd you get involved with the Facebook page, Elvis, a celebration of the man and his music?
Well, that's an interesting story. It was under a different name when I first kind of stumbled across it. It was something about his music, right?
Yeah.
Elvis music, Elvis Presley music or something like that. And they had no admin. Well, they had an admin, a very nice young man, but he wasn't even 18 years old yet. He really was kind of in over his head, and there was no moderation going on. It was filled with spam and everything else. I was trying to help him along the way, and he made me an admin.
Oh.
And eventually, with my Elvis knowledge over the years, I kind of essentially took over the group because it just needed direction. And that's when Janet and I came across each other, too.
Okay. That's fantastic. What do you find most intriguing about Elvis and his music?
You know, what I've always been fascinated about is his diversity of style, that the Elvis of the 50s versus the Elvis of the 60s and the 70s. And even, you can almost go every year in between. His voice is so versatile, his ability to sing so many different genres. It's that voice. It's an amazing gift he has.
I totally agree. Do you have a favorite decade, if you had to choose, between 50s, 60s, or 70s?
I've always kind of been partial to the 60s just because of the purity of his voice. When he came back from the Army, something had changed in the quality of his voice. Yeah. It was, especially in the early to mid-60s, it was nearly flawless during those years.
Right. The Elvis's Back album is a fantastic album. So, Dave, we have a mutual friend, Janet Bostic. You mentioned her earlier, and she wrote an Elvis book. I read it. I thought it was pretty interesting. What'd you think of Janet's book?
I liked it a lot. I especially appreciated the little song references that were kind of intertwined in the lyrics throughout. It kept it very entertaining, especially for the more discerning Elvis fan who was kind of looking for those little tidbits like that.
Yeah, I did too. Her book is called Operation Gratitude, and I hope Janet's listening. We are speaking with Dave Rogers. He's an avid Elvis fan. He's one of the administrators of my favorite Elvis Facebook page. Dave, do you happen to be also a fan of the Beatles?
I am a fan of the Beatles, indeed.
Do you happen to be like me? I claim to like Elvis and the Beatles equally.
I'm probably a little bit more on the Elvis side than the Beatles, but because it was Elvis first,
right,
and then the Beatles came afterwards. So
exactly.
But it is a different focus. With Elvis, it's Elvis the man, Elvis the image, Elvis the music, the movie star. With the Beatles, for me, it is primarily the music itself.
And they were great songwriters. Dave, before you go, now we have talked off air. I know you're a sports fan. I can't resist. Do you mind if I ask you one sports question?
Sure, no, go right ahead.
It was in the news recently. What are your thoughts on Caitlin Clark being Time Magazine Athlete of the Year?
I thought it was deserved. I mean, if you think about what that award is, it's really about the person who dominated the sports headline.
Yeah.
And there really wasn't even a close second to her last year or this past year.
I mean, she has transformed women's basketball.
She has. She's put the WNBA on the map.
Yeah. I'm thinking of a trade. Should the Celtics trade straight up Jason Tatum for Caitlin Clark? What do you think?
I think it would work, man. She's good. She could do it.
So, Dave, thank you so much for coming on the Mop Tops and the King. I hope you've had fun. I'd like to send you off with a song, any song at all. I'd love to play for you.
Elvis or the Beatles?
Anything. I'd be happy to play.
What is my favorite Elvis song right now? I like Don't You Think It's Time.
Oh, I like that one too. I think that's the flip side of Wear My Ring Around Your Neck, if I'm not mistaken.
You are correct.
We're going to cue it up right now. And once again, Dave, thank you so much for coming on the Mop Tops and the King.
Thank you, Steve. It's been my privilege. Appreciate the opportunity.